Bonjour, time travelers! Thank you for joining me today on the streets of Paris, where we can dine at a sidewalk cafe, soak in the beauty of this magical city, and escape the pressures of everyday life. We'll begin your experience with an introduction to the Lost Generation, followed by hearty servings of two modernist authors, William Faulkner and Ernest Hemingway. And then we'll close with a brief rundown of your lesson agenda. But why am I coming to you from the City of Light to discuss American authors? Stay tuned, and you are about to find out. Okay, so we're not really in Paris, but it was fun pretending, right? And Paris is actually very relevant because while not all American modernists fled to Paris, many of them did. And that made Paris a very influential place in the development of modernism. Well, you're very aware by now that World War I had a profound effect on people all over the world. The generation that came of age during that war watched everything they trusted, everything they believed in, change. A lot of them felt like the traditional values they had been raised with just didn't make sense in this chaotic, unstable world. They were disillusioned. Remember that word? They had lost faith in the beliefs and values that they had once held dear. Many of them chose to live a hedonistic lifestyle. Live for today, don't worry about tomorrow, just do whatever brings you pleasure. Not exactly a healthy outlook, but after the chaos and devastation they had witnessed, they just felt sort of lost. A lot of these folks were also growing dissatisfied living in the United States. One reason was prohibition. In 1919, Congress ratified the 18th Amendment to the Constitution, which prohibited the making, selling, or transporting of alcohol. And alcohol had become part of the hedonistic lifestyle we were just talking about. Another reason is that they didn't like President Warren G. Harding's return to normalcy policies. They didn't want things to go back to the way they had been, those normal ways of doing things that had led to war. Many American authors became expatriates. An expatriate is someone who leaves their country of origin and chooses to live somewhere else. During the early part of the 20th century, a lot of these American expatriates were drawn to Paris. We're talking about writers like Ezra Pound, Gertrude Stein, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Ernest Hemingway, and Edna St. Vincent Millay. In Paris, they could live unconventional lifestyles, indulge in their creativity, and hobnob with artists like Picasso. They often gathered at the home of Gertrude Stein, surrounded by modern art, and sought Stein's critiques of their work. It was actually Gertrude Stein who called this group a lost generation. The comment may have been made in private to Ernest Hemingway, but once Hemingway included it as an epigraph in his wildly popular novel The Sun Also Rises, the name stuck. So did all modernist authors feel a bit lost? Maybe so, but did they all decide to become expatriates? No. This week, you'll be introduced to a Mississippi author with deep Southern roots. He may not have moved to Paris, but he sure did grapple with a lot of disillusionment in the American South. His name is William Faulkner. William Faulkner grew up in Oxford, Mississippi, where his father was employed by the University of Mississippi. Faulkner's great-grandfather, Colonel William Clark Faulkner, had been a colorful character, known for his Civil War exploits, railway interests, and for writing some books. He was a major influence on his great-grandson, whose writings often connected the sins of the past with the tribulations of the present. Whew, talk about disillusionment. The young Faulkner, who you may have noticed changed the spelling of his surname, published a book called Soldier's Pay in 1926. It was about a wounded World War I veteran returning home to Georgia. And it's like every good dream he once dreamed has been shattered. But most of Faulkner's novels are set in Mississippi, in a fictional place called Yoknapatawpha County. This week, you'll read excerpts from the first chapter of one of these books. It's called Absalom, Absalom, and it pieces together the story of a man named Thomas Sutpen, as different voices offer their memories of this man throughout the book. It begins with old Miss Rosa Coldfield, who shares her version of Sutpen's life and influence with Quentin Compton, a young man who will soon be leaving for Harvard. Sutpen basically ruined a lot of lives with his selfish and violent ways. Actually, Sutpen could be sort of a metaphor for the South, with the troubles of Faulkner's generation being rooted in the institution of slavery. With this small dose of Faulkner's work, you'll learn a lot about his very distinctive style of writing. Faulkner uses a lot of stream of consciousness, as you'll see with Quentin Compton. Faulkner also loves detailed descriptions, so get ready for some of the longest sentences you've ever read. Faulkner loves to play around with non-linear timelines, so you'll jump back and forth in time as you read. And then there's his exploration of themes. His flawed characters will struggle with social decay, moral dilemmas, and the burden of a dark past. Speaking of dark, Faulkner wrote in the style called Southern Gothic. You remember how Gothic tales had big, creepy mansions, eccentric characters, and a lot of death and decay? Well, just picture all of that in a Southern setting. And finally, you'll notice Faulkner's use of dialect and local color. The ways his characters speak, think, and interact with one another really establishes a sense of place. Even though you'll only read excerpts from one chapter of one book by William Faulkner, you'll get a really good sense of his distinctive style, which is very different from the style of another modernist writer, Ernest Hemingway. Ernest Hemingway grew up outside of Chicago, Illinois. Instead of going to college, he jumped right into the work world and became a reporter for the Kansas City Star. During World War I, Hemingway served as an ambulance driver for the Red Cross in Italy. Hemingway was hospitalized in Milan after being wounded in 1918. After the war, he went back home, but he had difficulty rejoining normal life after everything he had experienced in Italy. Eventually, he became a foreign correspondent, which took him to Europe and made him one of the most famous expatriates of all time. While living in Paris, Hemingway was mentored by Gertrude Stein, and he published his breakout novel, The Sun Also Rises, which tells the story of American and British expatriates who travel from Paris to Spain for the bullfights. You'll be reading the first couple of chapters this week. You'll also read Soldier's Home, one of Hemingway's short stories. It tells the story of a young veteran returning home from the war with lingering psychological trauma that makes it difficult for him to rejoin what's considered normal life. Does that sound familiar? Maybe a little like what Hemingway experienced when he came home from Italy? It was a powerful story, and it's also a great introduction to Hemingway's style. Hemingway created a style that is definitely unique. First, there's something he called his iceberg theory. He kept the words on the page to a minimum and let the reader infer the deeper meanings beneath the surface. He wrote with simple and direct prose, nothing flowery or complicated, and none of those long sentences Faulkner loved so much. Hemingway stuck to the show, don't tell principle, letting readers infer the characters' thoughts and feelings from their actions and dialogue. And his dialogue wasn't dramatic, it was simple and direct. A lot like how people speak in real conversations. Hemingway loved action, so count on his characters to be out there doing things. Remember the bullfight I mentioned? Finally, Hemingway wrote from an objective point of view. He didn't do that stream of consciousness writing that was popular among modernists. He wrote like a journalist, which, of course, he had been. Okay, you're almost ready to get started on Faulkner and Hemingway, so let's quickly go over your agenda for the week. But why do it here? Let's travel back to Betty. As usual, beginning today and lasting through day 4, you'll have PDF readings and activities followed by online practice. And then on day 5, you'll have reflection questions and some refresher writing skills practice. And then you'll rewrite a passage from Faulkner's book as if it had been written by Hemingway. It'll be a fun way to really grasp that Hemingway-esque style while flexing your creative muscles. And finally, we'll wrap up this lesson with your online assessment. Now, as you embark upon your Faulkner and Hemingway journey, there's only one thing left for me to say. Au revoir, my friends, au revoir.